Going to be going over different types of muscle contraction, how we generate energy to power muscle contraction, which the energy we need is ATP, and the different effects of exercise on muscles. So when it comes to skeletal muscle cell contraction, it's an all or none response. So a skeletal muscle cell either contracts or it doesn't. The plasma membrane or the sarcolemma either reaches that, depolarized state in order to reach action potential so that the magical number is reached and the entire plasma membrane is going to depolarize, contraction is going to occur, or the threshold potential is not going to be reached and the muscle cell isn't going to contract. Okay. So muscle cells or muscle fibers either contract or they don't contract. Okay. There's no partially contraction. But the strength with which a muscle contracts is going to be determined on kind of two things. How many muscle cells are stimulated to contract within that one muscle organ, or how quickly a stimulus is coming from the nervous system in order to initiate a contraction. So there's going to be a different push from the nervous system if I'm, lifting up this AirPod case versus I'm trying to pick up the desk that this computer is sitting on. There's going to be a different frequency of stimuli coming from the nervous system, and also the number of muscle cells that are going to be recruited to contract will be different. I don't need very many to be recruited to pick this up. I'm going to need to recruit quite a few muscle cells in order to lift this desk up. So we have three main types of muscle contraction. I'm going to start down at the bottom here with a muscle twitch. So a muscle twitch is one single contraction that has complete relaxation, and it is caused by one single stimuli from the nervous system. That's not normal. We don't typically do that. You may have experienced twitch in your life, but that's not how muscles function in general. So a twitch would be one nerve stimulus, the muscle contracts and it relaxes. You can see it kind of on a wave, and we'll look at that further slides. Most of the time, we're going to be in unfused going into fused tetanus. So unfused or incomplete tetanus, fused or complete tetanus. So unfused or complete tetanus is a stimulus comes from the nervous system and the muscle cell starts to contract. So we're increasing in contractibility. It contracts, and then depolarization is occurring. Repolarization is occurring where the sarcolemma is getting geared up to receive another nerve stimulus. And so the muscle is starting to relax, or the sarcomere is starting to slide back. But then, all of a sudden, another nerve stimulus comes and contraction happens again. But this time, the contraction is stronger than the first contraction because the muscle did not go back to complete relaxation. And I want to make sure you understand that the sarcolemma always has to go through that depolarize, repolarize, depolarize, repolarize. What I'm talking about is what is occurring as far as contraction inside the actual sarcomere. So with unfused or incomplete tetanus, a stimulus comes, depolarization occurs, the muscle is starting to contract, repolarization is occurring, the muscle starts to relax, but another nerve stimulus comes, and we get a stronger contraction. Starts to relax, stronger contraction. And we call this increase in intensity wave summation. So in unfused or incomplete tetanus, you will see it on the chart on the next slide. You see contraction, partial relaxation, stronger contraction, partial relaxation, stronger contraction. In fused or complete tetanus, the stimuli are coming so fast from the nervous system that you don't actually see any relaxation in the muscle at all. It's going to be smooth and continuous and just keep contracting, keep contracting, keep contracting. So, Ms. Cheryl, what does that look like? Well, here we go. So a muscle twitch, well, let's look at this graph. So the little red arrows down at the bottom, you probably cannot see my cursor, so I should put one up there. Well, hopefully you can see it. The down at the bottom here, the little red arrows are a nerve stimulus. Okay, so here in a muscle twitch, there's one nerve stimulus, which gives you contraction and then complete relaxation. So that's a twitch. That's not how muscles work, though, usually. Okay, wave summation is showing here where you have a stimulus. We start to see relaxation, and then another stimulus comes, and that next contraction is slightly stronger. And then the third stimulus comes, and that next That third is slightly stronger because of the concept of wave summation. 3 is unfused or incomplete tetanus, which is really being showed here. And number 2, the wave summation, where you're having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stimuli that are coming at a rate where you're getting partial relaxation, but then slightly stronger contraction, partly stronger, partially relaxation, and then getting stronger, stronger, stronger. And then down here with fused tetanus, you see how quickly, there's no time in between these nerve stimuli coming. And so because of that, the muscle contracts and you see no evidence of relaxation until the stimuli stop. So that is fused or complete tetanus. And that's what we're doing most of the time. And it makes for nice, smooth muscle movements. So what do we need for our muscles to contract? Well, I know we've talked about that we absolutely need two molecules. We need ATP to energize the myosin heads to be able to grab onto actin to move them. We know we need calcium to bind to actin to remove the bodyguards that were protecting actin from their myosin binding sites. ATP very little is stored in our cells. I don't know if you remember from the beginning of the lecture when I got up and ran around the room for a few seconds. We only have 4 to 6 seconds worth of ATP stores in our muscle cells. After that, we have to generate ATP in order to keep our muscles moving. It's the only energy source that we can use to directly power our muscles is ATP. And there are 3 ways in which we generate ATP in the body. First is we directly phosphorylate ADP with creatine phosphate. That sounds pretty intense, but creatine phosphate is a substance that is in our muscle cells and is going to donate essentially a phosphate group, to ADP, which will make it ATP. We have aerobic respiration, which we've discussed uses oxygen, and anaerobic respiration that does not use oxygen. And we're going to utilize all of these 3 pathways to generate ATP. So creatine phosphate is this high energy molecule, and it's only found in our skeletal muscle cells. And after we deplete that 4 to 6 seconds worth of ATP in our cells, creatine phosphate is then going to donate a phosphate group to ADP, adenosine diphosphate. If adenosine diphosphate gathers another phosphate group, it's going to become adenosine triphosphate or ATP. The creatine phosphate is going to be depleted in about 15 seconds. So overall, you've had about 20 to 30 seconds worth of, getting up and getting it going type of thing. After that, we're going to rely on a couple other pathways. So this slide is just showing phosphocreatine. It's going to give that ADP a phosphate group to end up generating creatine as well as ATP. And as you can see, this substance has nitrogen in it. So this would be what part of our nitrogenous waste that we would need to get rid of in our body. Aerobic respiration. So this occurs during light to moderate exercise. It's what we are in most of the time, 95% of the time. Okay. This occurs in the mitochondria of the cell. So I know in chapter 3, when we talked about our different organelles, and I said, what does the mitochondria do? And everybody yells, powerhouse of the cell. Well, what does that mean? It means that the mitochondria uses glucose, uses oxygen to make 36 ATP, carbon dioxide, and water. Okay. This is fairly slow though, and so sometimes it cannot keep up when we have a really high demand or intense exercise. But for the most part, 95% of the time, we are making ATP using aerobic respiration. And again, it happens in the mitochondria of our cells with oxygen. So this little brown thing here would be the mitochondria. Cytosol, if we look out here, if we're orienting ourselves on the slide, cytosol we know is the fluid component of cytoplasm. And actually, anaerobic respiration is the first step of aerobic respiration, not to make things confusing, but anaerobic respiration is also called glycolysis. And glycolysis is kind of the first step of what is known as the Krebs cycle or aerobic respiration. If enough oxygen is present, then the process is going to continue to end up yielding this 36 ATP with oxidative conditions, which means with oxygen conditions. If there is not enough oxygen, then glycolysis is just going to continue out here in the cytosol or the cytoplasm, and the yield is very, very different. So if we do not have enough oxygen, I'm going to go back to this slide, okay? Glycolysis is going to occur, and glycolysis is going to break glucose down to pyruvic acid, and 2 ATP are going to be generated. So literally, you get only like a 5% yield in comparison to what you would get with aerobic respiration. So under anaerobic conditions, you end up getting 2 ATP molecules broken down from glucose and pyruvic acid. That pyruvic acid is going to be converted into lactic acid. And again, we know lactic acid accumulates in the body, can bring our pH down. It causes soreness. If you've ever experienced that soreness in your muscles, you have done anaerobic respiration, and that is accumulated in your body, and you have to get rid of it. There is a whole biochemical process called lactic acid cycling that you can learn about in biochemistry. Anaerobic glycolysis is 2.5 times faster than aerobic respiration, which is kind of a slow and steady thing. However, there are consequences, which are not producing enough glucose or not producing enough ATP, burning through a ton of glucose, and generating that lactic acid, which can lead to muscle fatigue, soreness, etc. Okay. Now, you might have heard of like HIIT workouts, like high intensity workouts that are working on doing anaerobic respiration, basically, or glycolysis, because you use so much more glucose. You have to burn through so much more glucose to generate ATP. The idea is that you can potentially lose weight or get fitter faster, that type of thing. However, there is a consequence, and that is, you could have some muscle soreness and fatigue because of lactic acid accumulating in your muscles. So stretching, hydration, all those things are important if you're doing those types of activities. And rest. Your muscles have to rest in order to recover from this type of work. So again, 3 ways in which our muscles generate ATP. Phosphorylation of ADP from creatine phosphate, 15 seconds. Aerobic respiration is what we're doing 95% of the time, uses glucose, uses oxygen, takes place in the mitochondria of the cells, yields 36 ATP per glucose molecule. If we don't have enough oxygen present, glycolysis is going to occur, aka anaerobic respiration. It occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell, cytosol of the cytoplasm, sarcoplasm, whatever you want to say. For every 1 glucose molecule, we get 2 ATP plus pyruvic acid / lactic acid. So a muscle is fatigued when it's being stimulated to contract, but it just can't. It's like, I'm good. I'm tired. I can't do this. Okay. There are many different theories as to why muscle fatigue happens. Your book mentions talking about an ion disruption, not having enough calcium, not having enough potassium, that could be leading to muscle fatigue. But one of the biggest reasons they believe, muscle fatigue happens is due to an oxygen deficit. So the demand that you're asking of your body just can't keep up. It's not that you're totally not breathing or don't have enough oxygen, is that you don't have enough in giving to the muscles on demand in order to keep them supplied with enough ATP that they need, and they just get too tired and they can't do what they'd like to do. I mentioned in class, I don't know, the one or both classes, about you can actually hit a wall. Normal everyday athletes are not experienced that, but people who are doing like Ironmans, marathons, stuff like that will literally have where their muscles become so fatigued that their brain is saying move, and the muscles literally just stop. They just stop. They collapse. They stop working. They hit a wall. And that oxygen deficit needs to be, it's like, if you overdraw on your bank account, it has to be paid back in order for you to get back into aerobic respiration and be able to use those muscles again. Muscle performance really is affected by blood supply, and different types of exercise are going to affect the muscles differently and affect blood supply. 2 different types of muscle contractions. So isotonic muscle contractions occur when the actin can actually successfully slide. Okay. When there is sliding in the sliding muscle filament theory. So like this is isotonic contractions right now. Okay. Isometric is when there's tension in the muscles. So like I am pushing my hands together. And my muscles, like I'm creating tension in those sarcomeres. However, my muscles are not moving. Okay. This is isometric. This would be isometric. This would be isotonic. Okay. Isotonic is successfully sliding or moving. Isometric is staying the same. So creating a tension, but not moving. Muscle tone. All right. So when you look at someone and see that they have muscle tone, I know I mentioned this in class. We talk about having, there's definition to the muscle. Well, why is that? It's because the muscle is actually being partially contracted all the time. So some of the muscle fibers, which are muscle cells, are partially contracted, and that muscle is like ready. It is like a sprinter down in the block getting ready to wait for the gun to go off for that race. That muscle is just ready to do whatever, whenever. Muscle tone is the sign of healthy muscles that are just ready for action. On the opposite of that, if you have flaccid muscles, okay, flabby muscles, they are not ready. They are, watching Netflix with, popcorn on their face. They're just not ready to go. Okay. They also are not going to have a very good blood supply in order to keep them healthy, keep them ready. Okay. So muscle tone is important. How does exercise affect our muscles differently? Well, exercise and endurance is going to actually cause us to have better vascularization to our muscles. They're going to get a better blood flow. More blood means more oxygen, more glucose, more cells, like different types of white blood cells that can repair things if there's any type of injury to that muscle. It also causes our skeletal muscle cells to have more mitochondria. If they have more mitochondria, they can make more ATP using oxygen to just keep you out of that anaerobic respiration to keep your muscles less fatigued for longer. So it can increase your endurance, your longevity. Resistance training doesn't cause us to have more vascularization. It actually causes the cell to increase in size. So when we lift weights, we're not getting more muscle cells. We're getting more cytoskeleton. We're getting more myofibrils, more myofilaments, more sarcomeres inside the cell, which I think is really kind of cool. That when we can visually see muscles getting bigger, you're getting more cytoskeleton inside of that individual muscle cell. All right. That's it for chapter 6 notes, part 4.